Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Welcome to my latest Reel in a Bag project. This one was sent in by Paul, and this one is a Penn GTI level wind reel that I guess he started to take apart and then maybe lost some confidence in. So we're going to show you, if you have one of these apart, how to service it and reinstall it. If you are wondering, regardless of what type of reel you have, whether it's something that can be repaired, maybe you're finding it at a flea market or something, we'll show you a little bit of a system to use when something like this becomes available. And overall, we'll kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of this one and show you all of the pieces and parts and how they come together. So while I'm kind of doing an inventory here, at least mentally, let's take a look at a couple of things, and I'll encourage you to subscribe to my channel, and if you like this, to see these kinds of things, well, then I would encourage you please to hit the notification button and to assure yourself that you'll see all of the reels that I do. Try to hit it always on that notification button. So the first thing I'm noticing as I do an inventory of the spool pieces and parts is that this spool is overloaded with line. How do you know that? There should be a shoulder here. Don't bring it all the way up to the top where it can start running over. When it starts running over like this, it will trap itself inside the reel, and that will cause for jams and the like. Leave it at least a 1/16 of an inch below the last rim that tapers here, and an 1/8 of an inch would be fine. He's got braid on here, and I'll tell you what, with the amount of braid is like 30% more than monofilament. You'll never get to the bottom of the braid on this, so don't be afraid of leaving it a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch or more below that line. It's not going to affect the performance of the reel, and quite honestly, it's going to prevent that reel from jamming. So please take note and be aware of that. Well, when I get a reel in the bag project in like this one, oftentimes you'll find all kinds of pieces and parts in here, and Paul's at least come to the right place because I know this reel. But if you don't know the reel, please go out to the internet. This one's on mysticparts.com. They're a regional distributor for Penn parts, and if you need Penn parts, you can get them. Find the schematic to the reel. That's going to give you a burst diagram of all of the pieces that belong in this reel. And, well, if any are missing, you can go ahead and order them as well when you go through your inventory. Well, I like to do a mental inventory on this. As I mentioned, I kind of know this reel. So I'm going to not sit here and check off each part that I have, but I'll know when I get to a point where the parts are missing. The best way to do this is to work in major assemblies. So we're going to start with the bridge assembly. And when I do the bridge assembly, I like to knock the pin out on the gear shaft here. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy. And if it's not so easy, I'll take a little bit of a punch like this, center it up through that pin that goes through the shaft here, and tap it out that way. You can see how it will start to come out. That's riding on a slot inside the bridge post here. And when you get that started, well, just grab it gently with pliers or something and pull it the rest of the way out. And once you get it to the point, you should be able to get it sticking out like this and clearing that ridge. And if not, this one's a little loose now. Bring it up that way. Now you want to take that off. If the pin came all the way out, don't worry, you can reset it. You want to take it off because we can see that there's dried grease in here. And that dried grease will contribute to poorer reel performance and just cause nothing but problems down the road. I've seen a lot of these gear shafts just get frozen with the dried grease. Very, very sluggish. So wipe it all off, check for burrs or anything there isn't, this is where the pin rides in this groove right here. That's what holds the gear shaft onto the post. Once you do that, then here's a fishing reel grease. In this case, I'm using Penn precision reel grease. I call it blue grease, but it's actually a Penn product. And I don't care what fishing reel grease you use, but please use a fishing reel grease for that purpose. All right, we're going to put that back on. Let's see how much we can push that in, and you might need a little assist in the end there from that tap handle. So I'll just bring that over to the side. And I want to tap it so that this corner does not protrude from that ridge line. If it does, just kind of use a pliers or something to pull it the rest of the way in. So the 320i was a transitional reel. It replaced the 309 series. It became the first reel that Penn started manufacturing overseas in the with the GT2. And if your reel says made in the US, this is it. It was made before 2005. In 2005, the reel was moved over to Asia, and it was you won't find made in the US. Well, this is your level line feature. Just picked it up to show you, but I noticed that the bar that the line guide rides on is outside of the hole that it belongs in. And we're just going to put that back in right now so that we don't lose that bar. We'll come back and do that servicing. Once your gear sleeve is on, just do a little bit more cleanup. I don't know what this white grease is here. It always scares me that it might be like lithium grease, which is not really good for fishing reels. But nonetheless, we'll clean it. I'm noticing as I'm turning it that the bearing is spinning freely. And we'll take some fishing reel oil now, and we're going to oil that bearing there. As I mentioned, I like to work in sub-assemblies, so I'm over on the gear stack now, and I'm going to start to replace or put the washers back together the way they should. Clean off your main gear, inspect the teeth. This one's got that white grease in it. That's one of the things I don't like, that stuff clots. Use a hard brush to pull it out, and I put a paper towel underneath so that as I pull it out, it accumulates on the towel and doesn't go back into the slots as I continue to clean it. All right, well, that's better. All of the teeth check out. They're uniform. They're not chipped or cracked. So we're going to go ahead now and put some grease on the teeth as part of the service. So whether you found you just bought an exploded reel, or if you took yours apart, this is the same process and procedures for servicing it. Remove that gear sleeve, get underneath. Now take your main gear with the grease on it, put that back on. And now we have a series of drag washers. It's a 10 system washer set and a cap washer. Just was looking in my box for those. These are Penn HT100 washers. I choose to use a drag grease. I use Cal's Universal Drag Grease. I dip it in the grease. I use my gloved hand to kind of wipe it in, and then I wipe off excess before putting it into the gear cavity. This one has two keyed washers. Eared washers. Those are the ones with the points, and 3 keyed washers. So in this series, the first key washer goes in after you put that initial drag washer in. Here's your second one. This is kind of like rinse and repeat, right? If there's too much on there, wipe it off. I've kind of gotten to the point now where I know what too much is. And then we'll do this 3 more times for the other ones. So the first eared washer goes after the first keyed washer. Then the second keyed washer goes on top of that eared washer. And then the last of the eared washers goes on. And this one you got to watch in reassembly, because this is sitting right on the lip. You want to make sure that those points of that eared washer are in that groove, because if they're not, you're not going to have drag when you go to tension it. It's going to kind of bump up against the ridge of the main gear, and it's just going to cause issues. All right, after you put that last keyed washer on, there's a cap washer, and then there's a collar or a gear spacer. So that assembly is complete, and Paul was correct. All of the pieces were there for you. Well, we'll move over to the side plate then. That seems to be the logical next choice. For whatever reason, they chose to remove the eccentric. That's okay. You don't need to remove the eccentric when you're doing a service, but if you did, we'll show you how to reset that eccentric spring. So I'm looking now for the eccentric, the spring, the lever arm, and the screw to hold that down. Now that I have all the pieces, I can go ahead and do that. So this spring is going to load into the cavity here like that. You'll see that there's a V-notch in the cavity, and you'll see that the bent arm for the spring is up. Before you put that into the cavity, though, you want to find the hole in this eccentric. It's right here. And then put the piece that's facing up through that hole. Just like that. And usually it'll stick. If it doesn't, you might want to use a little bit of grease as a kind of a temporary glue. And then go ahead and set this into the slot. Now this is out of position now. There's no tension on the spring. This whole piece has to rotate counterclockwise. Sometimes you can do it by hand. Sometimes you need a little assist. If you need a little assist, gently grab that eccentric with the pliers and just kind of turn it until you find the equilibrium in this spring where it's not going to shoot. And then you want to push down so that that spring is riding in the slot here as opposed to the shoulder of that assembly. Once you do that, turn it over, and now you can put that arm on because you have enough of that eccentric protruding through your assembly to allow you to hook the corners of that, and then to put that tie-down screw on. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you leave them in the comment section, I will try to answer those for you. Sometimes it's as simple as, well, what's a good reel or what's not, or what do you think of? Sometimes it's a question about how do I get out of a particular predicament I'm in, or sometimes it's diagnosis. I have a reel that isn't doing something that it should. How do I figure out what it is? And most of the time I can kind of give you some advice on that, so leave it in the comment section. Now you'll see that we have a functioning eccentric and spring, and that's the way it should work. All right. Next up then, we're going to look for the yoke. We have a yoke. It's called a yoke because it looks like the yoke of an oxen. We're going to look for the pinion gear that goes inside the yoke, and we're going to look for the 2 yoke springs for this reel. So we have that. Assembly is complete. It looks like Paul cleaned these parts, or at least the parts are clean. They weren't filled with that white grease that we saw on the side plate there. You want to get grease onto both sides of the shoulder of the yoke. Get your pinion gear. And then put the grease on your pinion gear. After checking, like you did the main gear, to make sure that all of those surfaces are even, that you don't have a chipped or broken tooth or some other wear that may have caused the disruption. A little bit of grease onto the face of the eccentric and into the slot where the end of the spool will work. And you want to take your pinion gear with the slot on that gear facing out towards you. And now we'll work with that jack, which is going to hold everything in place. Go ahead and put it over the top there where it's a wider piece. Push it to the left. And now that's holding your assembly. Well, had it posed for the camera and knocked it out, but that's okay. We'll reset it for you just in case you didn't get a chance to see how that was done. So the 2 screws go in springs, I said screws. Slot on the pinion gear facing out. The other side's flat. If you put the other side out, it won't grab the spool. I get questions every now and then. It says, geez, I reinstalled everything and now my spool doesn't turn. Well, it doesn't turn because the pinion gear was set backwards. Alright, let's leave it at that. Just set that off to the side. Well, let's continue with that side plate build then. There's only two pieces left now. There's the dog and a spring that Paul had to mail back to me because, well, it was missing. He found it later. And then one of the side plate screws. And the side plate screw that you want has got a full thread on it, not the partial thread. To complete the next part then, we're going to put the side plate screw furthest away from you in. We're going to place the assembly in by pushing down, loading it into the cavity and turning it about 90 degrees. Now we can install the anti-reverse dog. That's the long piece, and you want it with the notch on that dog over here on the outside. Once you do that, turn the assembly the rest of the way so that you can line it up with that screw. And you just heard it snap. There are two plastic posts on here, so make sure that they get those posts set. And then just a couple of turns on this. You don't have to tighten it all the way down at the moment, just enough to make sure that it grabs that bridge plate. We have three more of those bridge plate screws then. It's not one of them. One more that's fully threaded, and two that are partially threaded. You'll see that they just have a smooth surface with the majority of that screw. Those smooth surface screws go on top, and it's a smooth surface so that those springs that are in that yoke assembly don't catch on that screw and kind of stop the functioning. So I'm going to go put those two screws in now. And once I get the three of them in, you can kind of tighten it down. Right now I don't have that last one. And sometimes it's the arm of the spring, or sometimes it's just an alignment hole issue. So turn it around like I just did. See where everything is going. And then once you have the three in, the fourth one should be aligned. But there's some pretty tight tolerances on that bridge. Sometimes you think you've done everything right and it's misaligned and you're kind of questioning why. Well, don't worry about it. Just kind of look around and see. All right, so that's your bridge assembly now. You can give it a turn, see how it's doing. Everything's working except that anti-reverse because, well, we didn't put the spring on. And Paul sent this spring to me, and that's a good thing he did because now we can put that spring on. All right, I like to use the pliers just because my hands are pretty big. Get it over the beak of that spring, or over the anti-reverse dog. Just like that. And now you'll notice we still have to put the top post in. Here's your post, here's your spring. I use a little pick and just try to work it in. Sometimes it sits easier than others. But it's on there now, and I'm just going to push it down with a screwdriver just to make sure it's nice and set. There you go. That's all set now, and now you'll notice we have an anti-reverse. You can see that dog over here going up and down, and the reel is stopping that way. All right, let's come around to the front one more time. We're going to put that spacer collar on, which fell off. I'm going to grab our steel wool. Clean off both sides. You can use a chrome polish on this. You can use a rod and reel cleaner. This has a little rod and reel cleaner left on it, just to restore the shine to that metal. All right, put that on just so that everything on the assembly is pretty much held in place. That part is done. Looks like Paul was correct. All of the pieces and parts are here. So I just want to do a little bit more. In the side case here, you don't need to take anything out. As a matter of fact, you can't take anything out there. other than the worm drive. So make sure that the bearing is turning. I do that by using a screwdriver inside the bearing. Make sure that inner race is turning. Then I'm going to use the oil. I'm going to oil the two metal pieces, the metal drive from the worm gear and the bearing. You don't need to grease or oil this idler gear. We'll service the pawl next. You want to remove the pawl cap. And there'll be a pawl in there, or inside the reel. This is the pawl. And the reason why you want to take that out is just for what we're seeing here. There's a lot of dirt and grease and junk that is accumulated on the side rails of this. A little bit of rust actually, but just give it a good cleaning because that will prevent it from riding in the track properly. Once you did that, you can put it back in the cup and oil into the cup so that it turns smoothly. Then you can reinstall. And when you're doing this, I recommend that you start by hand tightening that screw. Because if you don't hand tighten it, you might be cross-threading it, and if you cross-thread it, you're going to be in trouble. Keep moving it. You want to make sure that you seat the wings of that pawl into the slots in that worm gear, and you'll know you have it right when you can turn that idler gear by hand and it's working. Again, this bar comes out. I'll show you how that comes out because we'll actually clean it. We'll use that same steel wool just to knock off some of that dirt. And that's going to hold in the hook of that line guide. So let's reset that. And again, you have a little hole over here where that belongs. Okay, that's all in. Next up then, we can take that spool. Again, too much braid on there. Go ahead and take some of that off. Or don't fill it that much to begin with. I just had a reel come in the other day, and the reel was performing poorly. And the reason was that there was too much line on that spool. And what happened was the line was bunching into the back of the line guide drive. There we go. Just playing around with that. And I like to put grease on the shaft of the spool. Now somebody came in with a comment the other day, said, why do you do that instead of oil? Oil is going to make casting distances further. And I agreed, but I find with a lot of these reels, they don't get serviced. When this gets dirt on there, the oil evaporates, the dirt gets on there, and it freezes into the pinion gear. So I would prefer to do the grease and sacrifice the casting distance for a little bit of a precaution. All right, once that's on, then we can bring this whole assembly in. We've got 4 screws left here. Let's go ahead and put those in. And if you're like Paul, if you have a reel that you need serviced or would like serviced, I do that by mail. And if you contact me by email, and I do encourage you, please contact me by email on the business card that follows. I'll be able to provide you that reel repair information. You'll see a number on the card, and folks always want to call, and that's good, except that when I'm working in the shop, I can't answer the phone, and sometimes those calls back up on the voice messages, and I apologize, but it happens, and then I don't get around to responding to you for a while, and it kind of looks like bad service, even though it's not intended to be. I do try my best, but voice messages are the kind of down the line in terms of what can and can't be. So while I'm putting this last set of screws on and the handles on, let's review what we did. We got a reel in the bag in, and what I suggested to you was if you have that situation, maybe you're buying one, maybe a friend dropped one off for you, maybe you did it yourself and just had that oh gosh moment when you realized that you needed some assist with that. Go ahead and pull the schematic diagram for the reel. Make sure you have all of those parts. If you have all of those parts, after you've checked them off on the schematic, you can get started. when you get started with sub-assemblies first. Don't try and just kind of go hither and yon and put a piece here and then go over, move to another section and reel and come back kind of thing. Just start with a subsection. We started with the bridge assembly, and we kind of worked it. You don't have to start with the bridge assembly, but start with a section, and as you work on that, then make sure it's complete before moving on to the next section. All right, we have a tie down now. The handle's on. I'm kind of hesitating for a moment because there's one extra screw. I just realized it belongs over here. That's the value of doing what I did and put everything into a parts basket. Because if you put it into the parts basket and there's something there, well, you know you're not done. You know you either missed installing something, or in this case, maybe I thought somebody might have just been giving me an extra screw, but it is a side plate screw. I recognize that. Turned the reel over and found out that we don't have a screw in the side plate there. All right, we're going to finish this piece. I'm going to go install that side plate ring screw here. So if you want to service your worm gear, pull that screw and remove this trim ring. This is a little slot that's buried in the case. That whole trim ring will pull forward, and you can go ahead and put a couple of drops of oil on that worm drive. All right, we're getting to the point now where we got to see not only did we put it together right, but does it work? That's the more important question. These are nice reels. They have a couple of ball bearings in them. They're much stronger than the replaced 309, and everything is working well. We reinstalled that eccentric gear. Let's make sure that we're in free spool. Spin it. It spins nicely. And right there, you can see, we had talked about it before. It might be hard to see, but that rubber band is bumping up against the line guide now. So if you didn't recognize that, you'd say, oh, I didn't do something proper. Well, you did something proper, and unfortunately in this case, there's too much braid on there. All right, let's give it a try. We just flipped it into drive gear. We're going to tighten down the drag washers. I'm going to give it a ride. Turns beautifully. I think that's kind of what Paul was looking for in terms of the reassembly. He wanted to take this reel fishing again. I don't blame him. A little bit of oil into the handle to stop that squeak. And that's it. So your Penn 320 GTI, ready to go fishing again. So I hope you've enjoyed that. And if you find yourself in that situation, don't panic. Just kind of follow the steps we did, and you'll be well. For those of you that are first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you did. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.